The 7th Congress of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea was held in Pyongyang on the 20th and 21st. The Congress comprehensively analyzed and reviewed the work of the Women's Union during the period under review and discussed the tasks and the practical ways for the Women's Union to discharge its mission and duty as a revolutionary women's organization in the struggle toward a new great victory of socialist construction. Present at the Congress were the delegates elected by the Women's Union organizations at all levels. On hand as observers were officials of the party, administrative and armed forces organs. The rostrum was taken by Lee Il-hwan, member of the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea and Secretary of the Party Central Committee, Lee Do-sung, Department Director of the Party Central Committee, Executive Committee members of the Central Committee of the Women's Union, chairwomen of the Provincial Women's Union organizations, officials in charge of the work of the Women's Union at the Armed Forces organs, exemplary Women's Union officials and core unionists and officials concerned. When the Congress was declared open, the national anthem of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea was played. The Congress elected its presidium and secretaries. The Congress approved the following agenda items. 1. Review of the work of the Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea. 2. Review of the work of the Central Inspection Commission of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea. 3. On revising the rules of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea. 4. Election of the Central Leadership Organ of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea. At the Congress, Lee Il-hwan, Secretary of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, conveyed the important letter, "Let the Women's Union become a powerful unit in propelling the advance and development of our style of socialism," sent by the respected Kim Jong-un, General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea and President of the State Affairs of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, to the participants in the Congress. Jang Chun-sil, chairwoman of the Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea, made a report on the first agenda item, review of the work of the Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea. She said that during the period under review, Kim Jong-un wisely led the Women's Union to fully demonstrate its militant might as demanded by the new era of the Juche Revolution with its outstanding leadership and fatherly love. She stressed that Kim Jong-un sent a historic letter to the participants in the 6th Congress of the Women's Union 5 years ago, providing an immortal program to strengthen and develop the work of the Women's Union according to the lawful demands of the Korean Revolution and the development of the women's movement of Juche. She said Kim Jong-un has led the Women's Union to make its organizations at all levels militant ones with a strong sense of organization and discipline by launching an intensive drive for strengthening itself. She also referred to the immortal exploits of Kim Jong-un, who led the Women's Union organizations to vigorously conduct a mass movement conducive to the socialist construction. She emphasized that the successes achieved in the work of the Women's Union to implement the tasks set forth by the 7th Party Congress are entirely a fruition of the great leadership of Kim Jong-un, who led the Women's Union to be infinitely loyal to the cause of the party. Representing the unanimous loyalty of the entire participants and the women across the country, she paid the noblest respects to Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, the great pioneer and leader of the Juche-based women's movement, and extended the greatest honor and warmest greetings to the respected Kim Jong-un, who is strengthening and developing the Women's Union into a powerful political organization and force supporting the cause of the party faithfully with his outstanding and seasonal leadership. She said the Women's Union is faced with an honorable task to fully demonstrate the militant might as a mass political organization in the general onward march for implementing the program of struggle presented by the 8th Party Congress. The Women's Union should creditably perform its mission and duty for the times as demanded by the period of new upsurge and transformation of the revolution. For the purpose, it is necessary to take practical measures to bring about a fundamental change in the work of the Women's Union, she said, and analyzed and summed up on the basis of facts the shortcomings revealed in the work of the Women's Union during the period under review and their causes. She called on the women's union organizations at all levels to make an all-out dash for the struggle to bring about a fundamental change in the work of the women's union in response to the decisions of the Party Congress. She appealed to all to wage a vigorous struggle for a new victory of the socialist cause in firm unity around Kim Jong-un. The Congress heard the speeches on the first agenda item. The speeches analyzed and reviewed the successes, experiences, and shortcomings in the work of the Women's Union during the period under review and their causes. The speakers expressed their determination to make strenuous efforts with a new resolve and readiness to do the work of the Women's Union according to the idea and intention of the party. The Congress heard the report on the second agenda item, review of the work of the Central Inspection Commission of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea, and speeches, and adopted a resolution with a unanimous approval. The Congress discussed the third agenda item on revising the rules of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea. There was a report on revising the rules of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea, which was revised and supplemented in conformity with the requirements of the developing revolution and the principle of building the Women's Union. Then a resolution was adopted with the unanimous approval of the delegates. The Congress discussed the fourth agenda item, election of the central leadership organ of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea. The Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea was elected. All the nominees were elected members and alternate members of the Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea with the unanimous approval of the delegates. The first plenary meeting of the 7th Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea was held. Lee Il-hwan, secretary of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, announced the result of the first plenary meeting. The Executive Committee of the Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea was elected. Kim Jong-sun was elected chairwoman of the Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea, and Cha Hyun-ok, Lee Hyang-suk, Son Myung-ae, and Lee Hae-im its vice chairwomen. Organizing Committee of the Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea was formed. Chairwoman, vice chairwomen, and members of the Central Inspection Commission of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea were elected. Department directors of the Central Committee of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea were appointed. The Congress elected a committee for working out draft resolution of the Congress with members of the newly elected 7th leadership organ of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea, and the committee comprehensively examined the draft resolution on the first agenda item. The Congress adopted with a unanimous approval the resolution on the first agenda item, which reflected the contents of work to carry through the crucial tasks presented by Kim Jong-un in his letter, and the creative and constructive proposals of the delegates.